William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Thank you, Dr. Spalding. All right, so I have two notes that I'll toss out there because I think we need to talk about them a little bit more. The first is the encampments that was kind of fell into your group's scope of work. And so I asked a question of, I think, Dave Hogan. I don't know if Dave's still here. I sent him an email, say, Dave, are encampments getting better or worse or the same? And he was like, that's a good question. And so can someone kind of brief us a little bit on the situation with our encampments, whether they're growing, the closures that we have in place, and so just so we can kind of make sure we all have that understanding of the encampment environment. Cindy or Bernadette?
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, we did brief the encampment protocol to the Housing Committee. There were a lot of questions, but a lot of concerns for trash, for debris, for waste, for the businesses surrounding the areas. We have been tracking dashboarding ever since the first encampment closure in May. And dashboarding means we're pulling 311 calls, so people in the public who are concerned about encampments or people hanging out or whatever can call into 311. Obviously, if it's criminal, it goes to 911. And then we are putting those not only on a map, but we're keeping spreadsheets. Those calls actually go into Dave Hogan's group over at DPD, and they initially investigated, determine whether those are panhandlers or if they're situational or permanent encampments, and then we're able to log how many are there. The next biggest closure was Haskell, and so that's already begun. There were two sections of Haskell. The first one was closed earlier in the month. The second one will close next week. And as we are closing the encampments, people that opt not to go into shelters are migrating to other locations. And so there are more encampments. They're smaller, but we are tracking those, and as we speak, we have the street outreach engaging, and Cindy, you can take it from there in terms of the street outreach.
Yeah, I went to Haskell this morning before this meeting, and we had a count of about 82 persons there, and I think and our goal was to house 41, and I think we're probably about 38, and I can think of at least 18 people that have moved their tent already. I mean, we knew that was going to be part of it. So the net is through attrition. The intensity, the consistent and persistent case management, you're getting the number down, but and we know a lot about where they move their tents because you must continue so I think our goal of trying to move them from an unsheltered circumstance for at least half of that population, we hopefully will meet. I think we identified about 9 more permanent supportive housing and group home housing, and we're working on the most vulnerable right now. The City Square team is doing that literally right now every day this week, and then we will, the city will move forward and close that encampment down. So I think we achieved our goal of 50%, darn close.
Other questions for, okay, Sarah?
I just want to make a correction. We actually never voted on the shelter protocol, on the encampment protocol. It was shown at our commission meeting, but there was no vote. But I do know it was taken to city council, it was voted on, but I'm wondering, was it already not followed? Because the Haskell, it seems like it did not give the first group that's already been disbanded, it didn't give them the 45 days.
So I'll speak to, so the city basically said it's our responsibility to decide whether to close an encampment or not, and we're going to create a city policy. And so we provided our information to them to inform their discussions, but I think they've had discussions and plans, and is that fair, Bernadette?
That's accurate. I think the 45 days really probably was the only item that really the council wasn't particularly behind.
So does that need to stay in the report then, if that's been turned over to the city?
I mean, it's entirely up to the group. I think that the city will still, the council will still make a decision that they feel comfortable with.
The report will reflect the fact that the city has developed a policy.
Yeah. So
I think our notice was probably 39 days, but one of the critical components was to make sure that within that notice period, we included the first of the month so that individuals would get disability checks. So that had to be. So sometimes you might have to go outside the 45-day, but we were really close to sticking to the policy that it was a guideline that was never passed by anyone, but it seemed to be the most trauma-informed in our work.
Thank you. Rick?
We also discussed the timing, the 45 days, the actual closure would come over around the first of the month. As many of you know, a lot of people are getting a check, Social Security check. At that particular time of the month, they would have options. They could go to a hotel, maybe a group home, or a shelter, because the shelters tend to clear out at that particular time of the month to some extent. Because a lot of people in the shelters are getting a check, and so they decide to go to a hotel room for a couple of days. And so there's these spaces available where a lot of the shelters are full all the time, except the first of the month. And so if it was decided that it would have to be closed when it was, this has already been covered, I know they're a health hazard, not only the people outside the camp, but the people inside the camp. For instance, Tennessee City, there was a couple of people got murdered. Okay, so it's time to close the camp down. You come around the first of the month, you give the people some options. And I don't know if that was true to the city council or not.
Bernadette, did you mention the number of encampments there are now?
I didn't. It's, again, as we're moving folks, there might be, 2 on Forest Lane and 35, and 1 at LBJ, and 5 at Royal Lane on 75. I've got a number at Medical City, so it's now all scattered.
How many are on the spreadsheet now?
That's tough to say. I think Dave and I were talking about some are situational, so they're panhandlers, particularly over at Medical City. They're actually staying at Salvation Army, but they're going over there and panhandling during the day. So varies.
Okay. David, and then, sorry, I didn't see you there.
I just had two things. One quick question on your recommendation. Because I see you reference group homes, but I'm just unclear on the language. Are you basically, I'm just making an assumption from what I'm reading here. You're saying we have a need to make sure that the existing boarding homes we interact with are being properly inspected, but we need to further engage them in terms of providing shelter opportunities for unsheltered individuals. What's your recommendation?
I think the recommendation is, one is the awareness that group homes have a valuable place within the response to homelessness. That through the years that we've had a wide range of group homes, some very good, some not very good, that we have some rules that group homes need to follow. We had very low oversight of group homes, and so that oversight is important. Actually, this is not part of the subcommittee, but ongoing, ongoing education and those kinds of things came out of my own homeless advisory board. They felt like group home leaders didn't always have enough support amongst themselves and enough opportunity for learning and sharing the resources and that kind of thing. So that just sort of developing that perspective for homeless people.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I would say, well, let me ask you, just as a follow-up, did you look at, because I've interacted with several group home operators, and I've looked at the city ordinance that regulates them. But I know just in personal conversation with multiple ones, one issue that they've identified as their only source of funding is whatever the individual client may have access to, SSI or whatever the case may be. Is there any conversation about establishing the use of any type of voucher or flex fund, et cetera? I know we had a brief conversation about that with the flex fund that you're operating. But are you considering putting anything in place that would allow for a per diem payment to group homes for the receiving of unsheltered homeless?
There was, both Metro Care and ABC last year did have a separate fund that would pay a client's stay in a group home for 1 year. Okay, so if they're truly disabled with a mental disability, that would give them time for their SSI check to kick in, and so they could continue to stay there. But there was a fund with both MetroCare and ABC to pay for their stay at a group home for up to 1 year.
Do you know what the fund is, what the per diem is on that?
I don't have the details.
Historically, the county has a fairly large fund of nurses and caseworkers for placing people in group homes, exactly as we said, and then caseworkers that would oversee those activities. And that part of the program went away, and perhaps that's something that would be valuable to have that kind of caseworker involved.
Yeah, I kind of spoke with several because I think that this is only part of the, percentage of the mix of solution, but an important one because it presents an operator who can interact with case management to ensure whatever services are being better implemented as opposed to putting them in an apartment by themselves, putting them in a hotel by themselves. So I think it might work well with certain subpopulations. I do agree that they need to be inspected accordingly to ensure that we don't have bad operators out there that are being utilized. But I think that having a fund for that, that covers that per diem so that you can get further engagement. So another thing that board homes do is actually feed the people as opposed to just housing them and provide other services. So I think that would be an important criteria.
Let me clarify. So what Ricky and I have both alluded to is that there were funds to pay until people got their disability check. But I sort of hear you saying that maybe the disability check is relatively inadequate at times, and so that you would maybe even have supplemental funds that would continue along. I don't know that I've ever heard that.
Generally speaking, your Social Security check, the rent at a group home covers everything: food, shelter, clothing, the washing of the clothes. It covers everything. So, it's $550, $600 a month, and you've got $150 left over for your cigarettes and your snacks or whatever. So there's really not a need for an extra fund.
Well, I think boarding home operators would debate that with you, certainly. And when I've spoken with them directly, when they've laid out the costs that are incurred in the process, from covering the real estate costs to providing the services to providing the meals, et cetera, their costs run relatively high. So I think that, the communication that came back to me out of those conversations was more along the lines of 40 rather than them. That's debated. I think my primary concern would be to see if this remains an active part. I just think it's something that can facilitate immediate and long-term benefit in terms of getting, housing people and providing, direct interaction with the operator that's in place that will make it easier for case managers and as well as, provide consistent oversight to the individual.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Tanya, and take a look at your clocks because we're really running tight on time.
I have a two-part. First, when you asked about the situation with the encampments, I think if you were to ask a lot of the neighbors and people who live around the encampments, it's their opinion that it is getting worse. They are moving. There are more of them. Certainly, if you ask fire and police, a lot of feedback from fire and police that the situation is getting very difficult for them. Not only are they being called more frequently, but as new encampments are popping up, they are going into nicks and crannies and moving further away, getting behind fencing, cutting fencing, so that when there are emergencies and when there's phone calls that come through, the police and the fire are having a very, very difficult time to even get to some of these encampments. So, talking about short-term and what immediate needs are, we spent 3 hours today talking about some really good solutions, some good long-term solutions, some intermediate. But if we really are to look at right now what immediate relief needs to happen, I think we have to say it's the encampments. And we need to dedicate more time to having that discussion. The encampment on Haskell was closed because the state fair was opening. I mean, that's the reality. We have, all these people coming, all these visitors coming. Why was it not 45 days, or why did that happen differently? Well, hello, folks. I mean, we had visitors coming to town. We really need to make the encampments a huge priority. And, just sort of recapping this conversation today, I don't feel like that happened. The second question that I had was specifically for the outreach, or for the unsheltered homeless, and the outreach was in regards to LGBT. I know that the mayor and the city has a task force, an LGBT task force with the city of Dallas. That task force recently spun off to an LGBT homeless youth committee. As we're talking, I know Paige had mentioned her concern about making sure of public record that we talked about the individuals that have criminal records that we find housing, and we talked about homeless youth, but there's another category, and that's LGBT. And that falls into all of these different groups that I really think we need to make sure that we are looking out for. 40% of homeless youth in the United States associate themselves as LGBT. So we really need to make sure that as we're having these conversations, I know Houston has recently recognized that, and they have started a specific group to work on that, as has San Antonio. And I think that that in Dallas we need to do the same.
I actually think that Homeless House has an excellent youth outreach program and does reach
That's a little minuscule. We're talking about shelter, we're talking about outreach, we're talking about housing, we're talking about all these categories. Promise House is
So it's 2 o'clock, and that's the designated stopping point for the conversation. Let me say that this was the most focused conversation we've had. We actually touched all of the topics, I think, with some level of detail. I want to thank the people who did all the preparation and enabled us to have a conversation. Let me share with you kind of the process going forward for us to conclude this work. The process for a final report. So Ann and I are the ones who are drafting this report. We're at iteration number 6 of the report, and it's been shared on multiple occasions with all of you, even again yet today. It's the 58 or 59-page version. We're committed to creating an executive summary of it so that we don't put people to sleep that begin to try and read it. Suzanne?
Can you also include a visual? Because I do think a visual would be very helpful.
Yes. When you say visual, you mean PowerPoint?
Yeah. If you look at Neighbor Up or you look at Neighborhood Plus, I think one of the reasons why they've gotten traction is because they have a visual that kind of encapsulates the major strategies.
Okay, graphics.
Infographic.
Yeah. Infographic or something.
Yeah. We're taking notes. A lot of people they like horizontal documents these days. The PowerPoint presentation with bullets is what people are accustomed to. So the vertical document throws them sometimes. But we're committed to probably providing a vertical and a horizontal version of this.
Will you be including a budget?
What's that? Yeah. So let me keep moving. So we're going to work with the subcommittee chairs to confirm the wording of their recommendations and to try and get a funding analysis to the extent we can, even if it's projection, even if it's our ballpark, so our community can have something. But don't expect us to be operationalizing this. It's not our job to do that. I mean, we're a group of ad hoc volunteers that came together, and there are other people that are smarter than us that can do this for us. We'll work then through Brenda in the mayor's office to get a summary to you. You'll each get an individual summary in your email. It'll have every one of these recommendations, and to the extent we can provide funding detail or whatever, we will. and you'll be asked to either express support for that recommendation, or you don't support it. And then if you support it, we're going to ask you to tell us whether it's a higher priority or a lower priority among the range, just so we can make sure we have a sense of consensus around it. That should happen by the end of the week if we're lucky. So I look forward to kind of getting that to you, and then please get that back to us. Because Ann and I are going to try and make sure as we craft the wording in the report that it totally accurately reflects the consensus positions of the group. And so if you have questions, call the subcommittee chairs. Ron, Dr. Spalding, Casey, reach out to them or send them a note. Say, I'm looking at your HMIS recommendation. I don't understand it. Can you help me understand it further? They've gone deep in to an analysis, and if you have questions, you should get them. And then finally, we'll publish another draft as soon as we can, after we get that information, and then you can take it, and hopefully it'll reflect all of the positions of the group. Finally, I think what I want to say is this has been an interesting process. Well, we're going to get through the finish, and then I'll stick around and you can speak if you want to, but we're beyond our time. Okay, well, yeah, Karen?
I understand the process, and I understand that we got to get through this. And I think this is very helpful today, but I do think there's some power in putting a document in front of real people and saying, raise your hand, do you support this? And I am just afraid we're going to lose some of that if we don't meet again, so that everybody feels like, yes, they approve this, and that we all, if you do it just on email, that loses some of that power.
Yeah.
So I know some people don't want to meet again. I'm just saying, I think the mayor said we didn't have to give it to him till it's ready, but we've done a lot of work on this, and I think getting it all together and then everybody saying, yes, we agree to this, tends to me to be important.
Yeah, I think in a perfect world that would be the case. He's made it clear to me that we need to wrap up our work, and this is it pretty much. Take your time writing your document and getting us the information in a detailed way, but we need to wrap up the commission work.
I'm not saying don't wrap it up, I'm just saying have another meeting that everybody actually...
When do you plan on going to city council?
Yeah, so I don't know whether there's even a going to the council.
Okay.
What we're going to do is basically give it to the mayor and the county judge and say, the ball is in your court. And he's told me he is going to own that. And he's going to take the job of keeping the work going and keeping it organized beyond our work.
But
When do you
where are
want
you
to do
getting the actual approval that this is all approved by a majority of this
I
council?
mean, I assume if you all check the box, you'll have an opportunity to check the box that says, I approve everything, solid recommendations across the board. You have an option of saying, I'm going to go individually, and I don't like that one, I don't like that one, I don't like that one, but I like that one. And we're going to do what we do, and that's add it all up. And at the end of the day, if there's not a sufficient support for a particular recommendation of a subgroup, it won't be included, or it'll be noted that it didn't receive sufficient support.
Will we see who voted for what?
Is it important to see who voted for what?
I would be interested in that, yes.
Okay, so we'll publish transparency then across all of the, in fact, we'll do a Survey Monkey or something like that, so everyone can get on, and then we'll publish the results of the Survey Monkey for everyone.
When do you anticipate, when is your timeline that you would like to get this completed and turned over to the mayor?
So I would like to, within 1 week's time from today,
1 week,
basically have
okay.
your input.
All right.
Have everybody's input, so then we can go and put a polish on a document that we can get back out to you. Casey? Yeah, so that's an interesting question. We talked about a system of accountability and leadership going forward because it's been kind of a theme that's come from, I think, virtually all groups that's been around the table. And so the report will reflect that we need a system of accountability and leadership going forward. What form that takes is whether the city councilman says, let's have a homeless commission, or whether the mayor says, interjurisdictional body, or both. I mean, that's going to be a function of the leadership of our elected officials, really.
Do you think that they're looking for at least a recommendation, that would accept a recommendation?
Would it be helpful if the group of added that in as are you interested in an ongoing formal system of leadership and accountability? If so, would you, yes, do you prefer this or that?
Yeah, just my personal vote, I'm in favor of it, because I think better practices, we've got so much other research that we can do, but that's.
So the problem with that is we really haven't discussed the pros and cons of either one as a group. We've never even had this conversation before this minute.
Yeah, so, do you want me to put it on the list?
I think it's hard to, because how would you vote or determine if there has never been a conversation? You know what I mean? So you haven't really had a chance to identify what it even means.
I think what we consider as we are checking the boxes on the
Okay, so I think just do outreach to your elected officials on that one and let them know how you feel. Okay, so let me say, because we're going to lose some people maybe because we're past 2. I appreciate the level of the engagement. It's been passionate. It's been passionate from all different perspectives, but that's, I think, very healthy, and that leads to a level of focus. So I appreciate that. I think we've all learned how daunting this situation is that we're in right now. I knew it was serious, but I now know how very serious it is for our community going forward. We've seen other cities that have done a good job. We've learned about that, and so that I'm very excited about knowing that there are things we can do to also progress as a community. And, finally, I'd say we have a powerful opportunity. I don't think this is the end of the work. I really think this is just the start. And if you're a person who gets up every morning and goes to work in this field, and you dedicated your professional lives to it, thank you. I'm grateful. Please continue doing what you do. If you're a person that volunteers and you care enough to give your own personal time to it, I'm also very grateful. And thank you for your volunteerism. And we need you to continue to volunteer. So with that, I think we'll take some speakers. We have 4 speakers, is that right? And I want to again thank everyone for your participation.
Can I just say something really quick? I want to thank you too. I know that this is a really difficult process, and you have a lot of people sitting around this table that have really strong opinions, as you stated. And, I know that there has been a lot of really heated conversations, but, you have stuck with this. We've gotten to this point, and I want to just personally thank you for your commitment.
Good afternoon, council. We are all members of the commission. It's an honor to speak before you today. And don't worry, I know the urgency and the fear that you get as you hand the preacher a mic at the end of the meeting. I promise I'll be short. And I'll read just like I say on task and let the others speak also. I, as well as several members here in this room, applaud your efforts as far as the committee. But we're also not cognizant of the fact that we've got a long way to go, very long way to go. We have a ton of immediate needs that need to be addressed. One point I've read recently, I know the city square is about to open. It's about a year project that's been going on. We're only going to 14 people in. Is that right? In November. And I've got maybe a solution that could kind of start help us out. Our ministry is called Forgiving and Love International Ministries. We've been doing what we call roadside restaurant the day after Thanksgiving. It's one designated day that we keep every single year. But what we do is we go into a homeless community and feed, clothe, we work with different city authorities such as the Dallas Housing Community. That was commissioned on financing for the community colleges. We've been able to put people into college. We've had one just graduated this year. We've been able to put people into housing. We've also worked with the VA to get people off the streets right as they are there, and they come up to us right then. The one thing that came to me was proposed to me that we start doing what's called mini houses or mini shelters. They're simple construction. They're about a 6x3 construction, and right now, our ministry has secured the funding for 50 mini houses, complete and total. What we're asking for the city is to help cut some of the red tape that we have to go through to place these shelters in. We have winter months coming up. People need to be covered, and they need to be taken care of outside of the cold and the elements. We'll combine that with the over 500 coats and blankets and pillows and backpacks, which have supplies in them, toothpaste, toothbrushes, cleaning supplies, water, and other essentials that people need to give to them, to give them a place to get in out of the cold. After that, we've also secured with FedEx and UPS for them to come in and help give jobs to anybody that wants a job, and we pass a few simple things. So we're just asking the city to help work with this. Some of you know and some of you don't, but we've gone through a lot of red tape each time we try to put this on. And we normally leave the area better than what we found it. We're just asking for your support again. Thank you.
I'd encourage you to communicate with Bernadette Mitchell, who's not here now, but she's the director of Dallas Housing, and she can probably help you with some of those statistical issues. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Robert Ceccarelli. Very perturbed again. Keep on repeating myself. There aren't any homeless people here at all. If this is a conspiracy, I'd like to know why. I believe I got to hold responsible, accountable, the head of the shelters. They could advertise this very easily and have them come here to talk about what the problems are with the shelters and with homelessness. I believe they're not doing it because they'll probably be shellacked by the people that are here, and I'm very troubled why there aren't any homeless people. I always got to recruit them to come here, and it shows you how much interest everybody is with the homeless because nobody here. But you got to know what's going on. I'll let you know what's going on right now. You missed the whole point about this permanent supportive housing. Ron Stretcher I had an article about Dawson State Jail. How come that wasn't ever discussed today? Ron Stretcher said it's a crisis to get home housing immediately, ASAP. It was never talked about. Dawson State Jail was never talked about. Only from shelters to permanent supportive housing. You just don't get it, okay? I stayed 14 months at Salvation Army. Without that, I wouldn't have got any permanent supportive housing. 14 months, I had to pull some strings to get that quickly. So why is it you just don't talk about it? Because you're not homeless. You don't understand what goes behind the scenes, especially in this weather when you're homeless, how desperate you are. You're not desperate at this at all. I'm getting sick and tired of saying the same thing, and you're missing the whole point. Please, do something about it. Talk about Dawson State Jail. It's a big article in the paper. It wasn't brought up at all. Tell me why. I'm very troubled at the bridge right now. Besides, the no air conditioning pavilion was done on purpose in 2008. 4 years, 5 years of it. I went to city council 25 times. It's finally, is that it? Go, let me play something, please. I'm just troubled at the bridge because right now they can't get housing in their transition house because if they have a warrant out for a Class C misdemeanor ticket, they can't get any housing. Anywhere in this country, you can find a job or get housing if you're a Class C misdemeanor. But for some reason, the bridge is not having these people move into their transitional housing. And one more thing is the stealing involved with the bridge. It's it's overlooked, and it needs to be looked at because they're blaming the homeless for people not guarding their clothes.
Thank you.
For the reason for this stealing. But please.
Thank you.
Dawson State Jail. Ron Stretcher made a big thing about it.
Thank you.
That's ridiculous.
Hello, I would like to thank the commission for the work that you've done.
I do know that it's taken a lot of time on a lot of your parts. I live downtown, and daily I see people that are desperately in need of help. I'm disappointed that we didn't have a larger conversation on mental health. It's mental health and addiction that we see downtown. We have people passed out everywhere. And to his point, and to the facilities subcommittee, I think Dawson, even in its current condition, how can that be worse than sleeping under a bridge? Or sleeping at the St. Paul Dart Station where you can get pushed over into the train track. I do think we need a commission going forward. I think it needs to be a permanent citizens commission, much like the park board. In my line of work, when I ask for project approval, I'm not on the committee that gives that approval or reviews that program. We need some people that ask tough questions and demand answers. I think that makes us as citizens better, and I think that makes the service providers better. We should be working at a team. There should be accountability, transparency. There should be a group that monitors efficacy. I think you guys do a wonderful job. I just think that we need to go forward and improve that. Please support a permanent citizens commission. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm a 13-year advocate for the homeless. I'm very disappointed. I got 4 major points. I'm glad that you had the speakers after your meeting and after this was distributed. This gets a D. I'll tell you why it gets a D. Number one, you're dealing with various aspects of homelessness and various needs. Why wasn't there a table in the front that indicated total number of homeless, emergency shelter needs, transitional housing needs, and permanent supported housing needs for the climate plan? Why? I'm a civil engineer. You gotta build the building, you gotta know what the occupancy is. If you're gonna cook a dinner, you gotta know how many people are gonna show up. So 5,000 out in the streets right now. Permanent supported housing is not gonna do anything today, tomorrow, and even in a year. So you're mostly structured, capital-oriented. You're not operating oriented. 64 million capital, 7 million operating should be switched. It should be 64 million operating, and 7 million capital. New York City is the best practice. Why didn't it indicate that it's the best practice? To be the best practice, when you have a law in New York City that requires all 30 or 40,000 homeless people to be sheltered. It's a law. Is there a conflict of interest? We seem to have old model approach versus new model approach. A builder who was here at the last meeting and said, you know, 140,000 for a 400 square foot big garage where I can do it for 30,000, that's old school. I'm not mentioning any names. What's the number one homeless need again? Emergency shelter beds, 5,000 at least. Your permanent housing first. It'll take 5 or 10 years to get there. And lastly, I passed it out, I apologize. I want to make sure that this information was received in case we weren't allowed to speak. Austin Tree Shelter is the best practice for emergency shelters in Dallas, Texas. $14.73. That's all included. That's $5,500 a year versus 20,000. No, versus 200,000. No, 20,000, 40,000, 20 or 40,000, whether it's 200 million or 400 million a year. So this is the best practice approach, and the greatest need, which you have totally left out, well, I can say, apologize if I'm wrong, is the need for emergency shelter today, 5,000 people that are suffering. And they're suffering unnecessarily. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we're adjourned, and thank you. Thank you first.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.